The Chester County Historic Preservation Network welcomes you to its virtual heritage series, live at 5 on the third Thursday of each month through the end of 2020. In tonight's program, we travel to the small hamlet of Ercildoun in Chester County to explore the historic People's Hall with presenter Tanya Thames Taylor.
I'm Tim Caban of the CCHPN board, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter, Tanya Thames Taylor. Mississippi native and granddaughter of former sharecroppers, Dr. Tanya Thames Taylor is an associate professor of American history, founding director of the African American Studies program, and member of the executive committee of the Frederick Douglass Institute at Westchester University. She serves on the board of directors of the Friends Historical Association, who's the publisher of Quaker History, and Friends Publishing Corporation, publisher of the Friends Journal. More locally, she is an active member of the American Association of University Women, AAWU, the National Council of Negro Women, NCNW, and is a sustainer member of the Junior League of Philadelphia. Tanya serves on the board of directors for the People's Hall in Ercildoun, Pennsylvania. She is enthusiastically working on the restoration of People's Hall, which was built by Quaker abolitionists and has served the community since 1846. So without further ado, Tanya, please take it away. Unmute yourself, Tanya.
Yes, I was saying I was unmuting myself. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Tim. And right now what we're going to do, I was deciding how was I going to do this? I mean, because I know that we have like Zoom, we have all like sort. And so I am now about to get started. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you for having me. And so now what we're going to do now, I was deciding like, how am I going to, present this material about this wonderful place, People's Hall. All right. And then how do I do that in just like under, this live at 5, just for a very limited time. And so what I decided to do was I said, well, should I do it like in a Zoom? Should I do it like a PowerPoint or a keynote or something like that? Should I do it in a movie piece? And I decided, you know what, the best way to do it is to do it where I am very comfortable. And that is really on porches and also in classrooms. And so I decided to do it more in the line of, having like a lecture. So instead of imagine you're in but our classroom is more so like a virtual porch, right? And so with that, I want to welcome you, and I welcome you like I welcome my students, and my grandmother used to welcome people on her porch. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this space. And so what happens is I'm going to now share my screen, because how I decided to do this was to do it via like if I was in class and I were giving a lecture. And so what happens is that we're now at the People's Hall. My hope is that you can see the first one, because I'm trying something new. And we're at People's Hall. This intro is like when you walk into People's Hall, this is what you see. And the place is of Ercildoun. Ercildoun has several names. It's also known as it's Ercildoun. The village of Ercildoun is also known as East Fallowfield. And in fact, that's what the municipality, the township is. But then some people, when they just want to group the whole area, they call it Cokesville. So it has these various names. All right, so again, this is the inside of People's Hall. And as you can see, we're on we're doing some restoration. But I really wanted to show you this particular picture, because here you see, let truth and error grapple. And we're going to see what that means, that truth and error grapple. And so I think the most appropriate way to sort of get to this subject matter and to really understand what we're going to be talking about today in this very brief, time that we have together. I think that there's a song, I know that there's a song that really captures this. And that song is a song that was actually sung by freedom seekers. Right? And that song is called Wade in the Water. So, wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. So the subject matter that we're talking about is troubling the water of, status quo, the water of injustice, right? So that's really what People's Hall is all about. Now, in order to understand People's Hall, we have to get and know what geography is. So exactly what do you mean by that, Tim Taylor? Well, geography. Geography is the study of places in relationship between people and their environment. I love National Geographic's definition. So in a nutshell, geography may examine the culture of how humans interact with natural environments. So history and geography, they go together, right? And so what happens is when you're talking about a land space, how do people engage in that space? That's what geography really examines. How do people now deal with their natural environment? And then how does their natural environment deal with them? And so now there are two branches of geography, and that is human geography and there's physical geography. Human geography is the study of people and their communities, cultures, economies, and interactions. All right. And physical is just that, the natural landscape. And I like what National Geographic really bottom lines it to. It says that geography seeks to explain where aspects are found, how they are, and how they develop and change over time. Geography. Now, an example of human geography, for example, the map, like a map of Ercildoun. So here's a map of Ercildoun, and I was basically trying to decide, was I going to sort of give you a lot of our stuff, but I want you to come out after this pandemic. So I'm just going to tease you, right? So we have like this map of Ercildoun, and here you can see, you're going to hear me talk about this meeting, Fallowfield. And then we have, you have Fallowfield meeting here, that's a part of land, and then you have the meeting proper. But then the area that we're going to talk about here is this area of People's Hall, this little building right here. Now, again, a map is an example of human geography, right? Again, culture is too, but this is just an example. Then the next piece that I'm going to talk about before we, get to the piece, I want us to have working terms. And one term I want us to know is iconography, right? What is iconography? Iconography is the tradition or conventional images or symbols associated with a subject, and especially a religious and legendary subject. All right. Or from your dictionary says, describes it as the use of images and symbols to portray a subject, movement, or idea. All right. So again, let me go back to that. The use of images and symbols to portray a subject, movement, or ideal. So here is some pictures. I travel a lot. And so I decided that, okay, I'll give some pictures of iconography. So at Westchester University, we have a statue of Frederick Douglass. All right. And that statue of Frederick Douglass is a piece of iconography. That means, again, it's a symbol. All right, it's a symbol. This represents that Frederick Douglass gave one of his last public addresses at Westchester University, roughly about 3 weeks or so before he died. Here is a piece of iconography right now in the state, in the capital of Harrisburg. They just put a monument out, and it has 4 statues of 4 prominent African Americans, and it's on the what they call the 8th Ward, and the city, the capital of Harrisburg was built on a Black settlement. Yeah. And so basically this monument commemorates that and the people who lived there. Again, but this is a piece of iconography. Here I am in Louisville, Kentucky, and this is York, the one who sailed with William and Clark. And so again, this is a piece of iconography. The flag is a piece of iconography. The Capitol building in Harrisburg is a piece of iconography. This is a picture of me, here I am, in the 3rd largest mosque in Morocco, right? And so what happens is that, and then this is again, a piece of iconography. It's like a White House, particularly if it has a connection to something. All right, so now what are we talking about? How does geography and iconography connect to People's Hall in Ercildoun? Well, the way that it connects there is that, and these are the points I want you to take away. So there's a thesis, And then what is this talk all about? And so the takeaway is the People's Hall is the central iconography in the geography known as Ercildoun, which is a village known for its deep roots in the Underground Railroad. Yes, without question, Ercildoun has proven activity in the Underground Railroad. The very existence of People's Hall says unequivocally, humanity over profits. The second point, and what is this about and how are we connecting geography and iconography and what does this mean, is that People Hall stands as a living testament to the ideology of a culture of a people who once worked, dwell, raised raised families, tended farms, created organizations, sustained school, produced powerful and successful women in their areas, let it be industrialist Rebecca Lukens, or let it be the most celebrated and honored astrophysicist Charlotte Moore Sitterly. And we have architectural wonders like the Lukens Pierce Octagon House. Another takeaway I want you to have is that anti-slavery agency literally created People's Hall, which in turn, so you have now this People's Hall that's there, this activity that's there created it. So what that means, which in turn, People's Hall's very existence shows and reflects the ideas of many in Ercildoun. And it also gave them vision. So not only did it reflect ideas, but it also gave a vision to how this village, this Quaker village, is supposed to see itself and be. The People's Hall also stands as an example of how Black agency exercise inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that shaped American politics in the testimony of white Quakers. So what do you mean by that, Tim Taylor? Always remember that the first abolitionist is the freedom seeker or the enslaved person who ran away. And so they were demanding, right? Their inalienable right? That right, this does not come from man, right? For life, liberty, and to pursuit of happiness. Now, this symbiotic relationship that Blacks would have with their allies, right, would basically really give our real hope and audacity to, again, right, to those people who put one foot in front of the other. And lastly, the very reality that People's Hall has been in continuous use since its founding in thought in 1845, in its physical form in 1847, demonstrates the importance of the building. In the end, I'm going to tell you that People's Hall have been in existence, yes, in continuous use ever since 1847. So this is how People's Hall looks now. Again, this is an example, a vital piece of iconography to understand interracial activism. Some brief history about Ercildoun, right? So let me just go back so you can see again how People's Hall looks here. And you can see that there's not really any major difference. Our goal in our preservation efforts is to try to keep the building, again, as true and authentic to what it was, right? And what it is. All right, so some basic history of Ercildoun is that it's just 15 miles away from the former slave state of Maryland. And why is that important? Because it complicates the silos of ideas, right? The uneasiness of the proximity of slavery and freedom. And that's the reason why I wanted you to know about geography, see? Right? Because again, where people settle, what is the ecosystem in which they're operating? What's the ecosystem? That is their geography. What are they sort of planning? What are their ideas? And so if you're only 13 miles away from an area, you know that you're doing trade, you know that you're interacting. And so basically what this does is that this, these boundaries that man basically, create and say, well, these states, these boundaries, what happens is that, that doesn't mean that ideas stop because you stop at Pennsylvania. Okay, Pennsylvania has freedom, but hey, okay, so that idea has to stop right there at the door. It doesn't happen that way. And what geography does in many ways, particularly if people are close, and even if they have competing ideologies, what it does is that it breaks down these silos, right? All right, so here's the backdrop. So in People's Hall, there was some members of Fallowfield Friends. So what happens is that People's Hall is associated with a Quaker meeting house that is called Fallowfield. Okay, and so what happens is that the Fallowfield Friends, right? They formed the Fallowfield Anti-Slavery Society in 1835. Okay. Now, again, I want us to sort of think about, again, how you're talking about this idea of slavery is really emerging, right? I mean, really getting some context, roughly about 40 years after, we now sort of go into and start to, work with the Constitution. Initially, we had something called the Articles of Confederation, but now we end up with the Constitution. And now you having, and that's going to be important to remember in a second while I bring this up. And so just a few, about 40 years afterwards, what you end up having is that people are now forming these, anti-slavery societies based upon the ideas that they have. And one friend that we have his grave. We have his grave at Fallowfield, and he's in our cemetery. And what happens is that he was the spokesperson for the anti-slavery, the Fallowfield Anti-Slavery Society. And he was a fierce speaker because one of the Benjamin S. Jones recounts, he was recounting events at this anti-slavery meeting in Philadelphia, New York. And in this pamphlet, what he said was that no 10 common mouthpiece make Jim Fulton. Okay, so you're talking about a person who had a fiery tongue, and it becomes important to remember that. So the very people who were in Fallowfield, I would say that they were more of radical abolitionists. Okay, and that's going to be important to remember. And again, how People's Hall gets started. And so what happens is he was joined with his wife, his father-in-law, Gideon Pierce, right, was also an abolitionist. And so what happens is between 1844 and 1845, two events actually that shapes, what's going to, some events that's going to create the conditions for People's Hall. And one of them was in November of 1844, there was Fallowfield. They held a meeting of the Chester County Anti-Slavery Society, and they debated, right, the Constitution. Okay. Now, this is important to think about because what they were saying is that in essence, that through the indirect complicity, right, of the Constitution to basically assist in this narrative of should people have slaves and people, how long should the slave trade go on, and the like sort. So they were debating that. Okay, they were like, look, does the very nation that this compact that we're under, this agreement that we have, is it really just there to foster slavery? Now, for some people, they would consider that treason. Because now, remember, the United States was still very vulnerable, and so what happened, vulnerable as in, staying together in a union set, right? And so what happens is, and so that would, get some people in the area a little upset, right? And then the next thing they wanted to know is that, well, should we vote? Should we participate in politics? So in 1844, they were really debating this issue right there at Fallowfield. Right. And for some people who were around, they were like, what are those people over there doing? Now, not only are they trying to get and reject slavery, but at the same time, they're basically questioning the very fabric of this nation. right? So note, remember that story. All right. So what happens is, and then they were inviting some real strong abolitionists. Like, so one abolitionist that everyone knows is Frederick Douglass, right? But Frederick Douglass would even name his son after this guy who was born free, Charles Lennox Reedman. And what happens is, not only was he born free, you all, but he was wealthy. And so what happens is they actually came to Fallowfield, right? And so what happens is that in 1844, on Frederick Douglass's own pen, not some interpretation, not someone's reaccounting of the events, but Frederick Douglass came to Fallowfield to speak on the subject of abolition. Charles Lennox Reedman would go to a meeting called Kenneth, right, in Kenneth Square, and then they would meet back up and they would really have, you all, a 3-hour conversation trying to convince people. Remember that line I told you about, that Mason-Dixon line, where they had people from like both sides coming to listen to Douglass and Reedman basically talk about why slavery threatened, right, America. Yeah. Right. And so therefore, again, when people don't know the name Charles Lennox Reedman, they, I guess oftentimes because of just conditioning, people think abolitionist, if it's not somebody famous Black they know, then it's like, oh, well, I don't know that person. But yes, so Charles Lennox Reedman was there, very active. And he influenced Douglass so much that Frederick Douglass named one of his sons after him. All right. And they would debate because they would, eventually go to different approaches. And Frederick Douglass would emerge as like the Black abolitionist, male abolitionist, because in essence, Reedman was born free and Frederick Douglass was born enslaved, right? All right. So now, again, some more of that backdrop to the story is that, so remember this first account that I told you was about, them having this meeting in November of 1844 that some people were going to consider treason. Okay. And then the next piece is that, so in 1845, this Fallowfield Anti-Slavery Society, they were hosting this set of lectures, right? And so again, they have already invited people like Frederick Douglass and Charles Reedman, who used to come, and I mean, they used to bring the fire. They brought fire. People don't know, like, again, people used to attack Frederick Douglass and these abolitionists. People forget that. Abolitionists were always on the run, especially those that were, really fiery, right? And so what happens is, in fact, Frederick Douglass would suffer from a lifelong injury because of a broken hand, a broken wrist that he would have. But what happens is that the second event that happened was now what we call the Fallowfield Riot of 1845. In the Fallowfield Riot of 1845, they invited this woman by the name of Abby Kelly. And like James F. Fulton, again, remember, he was fiery too, that radical. And they were like bringing people who were known for their radicalism. That's why I'm saying that they were, people who were, these abolitionists in Ercildoun, they were like real, like going to the fire abolitionist. And so what happens is, before Abby Kelly started to speak, they had this guy by the name of Edwin Fussell. And so he was like known for radicalism too, right? So he was up, you all, he was getting ready to talk. And then somebody from the background basically told him, sit down, shut up. Now, this is at a Quaker meeting. This is in a Quaker meeting, and they're talking and they're having this, debate. And these people, they were like, shut up. You've been talking too long. The man had just gotten up, but they already knew what his politics were. So they basically got up and they started telling him to sit down. And then next thing you know, the two sides sort of squaring off, right? And so basically the mob side was like, drag him out. And they actually grabbed him and tried to shove him through the door. And then next thing you know, sulfur was hitting stoves. The pipe on the stove pipe was knocked down. The window panes were broken. Women were just running out trying to get out, and people were even leaping from windows. Right? It was complete mayhem. And that same guy that talked about James Fulton, he basically said that, it was like almost like he was like, can you imagine this? What he did was he jumped up on a bench and said, you all calm down. calm down. All right. And so what happens is he says, everyone has a right to say that what they believe. And so what ended up happening is the leader of the mob, at Fallowfield in 1845, they basically said, I dare you come here. You're threatening our faith. You're threatening the church. You're threatening the Bible, and so the local magistrate was in attendance and he said, look, y'all got to go. And he got them out of there. So Kelly was able to go on and speak, right? And then a few days later, right, a warrant went out for the arrest of the rioters. And and this one guy's name is James B. Mode. He he would help to found People's Hall. But what happens is that he put out this warrant, the judge signed it. And so next thing you know, on April the 8th, he was called in. And when he was called in, they can only find one person of these rioters. And so he was in Westchester. He talked about how, look, his name was William Lucan. He said, I'm a Quaker. And he defended his actions because he was saying that their meeting was treasonous, right? And so what happens is after 17 witnesses testified and the like sort, guess what? The judge said, okay, the judge didn't buy his initial argument, right? And so he ended up being found not guilty though by a jury. Now, the story is, now check this out. So I want you to sort of really get how People's Hall origins get started. And again, what's happening in Ercildoun, right? Because what happens, that the abolitionist, well, he was found. He had to pay the fine. He had to pay a hefty $180 for the cost of the prosecution that didn't even go in his favor. So really what this tells you is that, again, being in this geography, right? Being in this space, that you had people who were radical, some people who were not, and then some people who were indifferent. And then the other extreme, they were sort of pro-slavery, they were pro-slavery. And so what happens is that in this particular piece, this is what this Fallowfield riot really represents. But then the Fallowfield riot during this time that they were having, going, back and forth, dealing with this stuff with court. What would happens is that Lucas he would visit Fallowfield. He would apologize for his misconduct. They accepted his apology. But in the meantime, what people of Fallowfield decided they wanted to do was that they wanted to continue their activity, and they wanted to see if they could, should they still have it at the meeting house, because the meeting house, was, in danger. All right. And so what ended up happening is that, so these people, they end up, they start to like meet and, on the way that Quakers do process, right? They have to sort of come, people share what their spirit is moving them to say. They really, vet their ideas, their thoughts, they sit with them. And so what happens is that even though the majority of the members of Fallowfield wanted to continue to have the anti-slavery society's meetings at the meeting house, they end up going with the minority. They didn't want to divide the meeting on this issue. And so when they end up deciding that they wanted to have a free hall, right, that they can discuss religion, morals, physics, politics, and the like, regardless of clime, caste, sex, or a party, what ended up happening is that they end up creating, right, the People's Hall. Now, I want to just say this because I like to say, people say their names. So we had James B. Mode, Lucas Pierce, Caleb Pierce, Joseph W. Thorne, James Newland, Eli Fred, Levi Coates, Thomas Copley Taylor, Nathan Walton, James Bolton Jr., Susan Walton, Mary Coates, Sarah Coates, George Baker, Job Roberts, and Richard Darlington. They wanted to build this place where people could go and speak freely. So People's Hall was established. One of the Mary Coates, they sold the land for 50 cents. So you know what that means. She was basically, again, a supporter of this radical cause. Again, her sister, I think, was, a part of them. And so what happens is, and they made People's Hall, and that's how People's Hall got started. is that basically there was a riot. So again, this is a real building dedicated to real ideas in the ecosystem of the geography of this place name of Ercildoun. People's Hall is a piece of iconography of ideas in agency, okay? And so now, what did this mean for People's Hall? There was a place called Philadelphia Hall, and it was a group of abolitionists in Philadelphia. The place took over a year to build, but what ended up happening, it was burned down in 4 days. Because of a bad case of whisper down the lane. What happens is it was a Black man that married a white couple, but at the end of whisper down the lane, it was an interracial couple that got married. So the building, that's one of the reasons that Pennsylvania Hall burned down in Philadelphia, and that was in the 1830s. And then what happens is not far from People's Hall, there was another place, and I want to say this right quick, is that initially it was called Free Hall. And I'm suspecting that those, because People's Hall, before it was named People's Hall, it too was named as like Free Hall. And I'm thinking that that was a nod to Pennsylvania Hall. And again, Pennsylvania Hall was supposed to be a temple to discuss free discussion. Again, like the very origins of People's Hall. And so, but what happens is, again, it was burned down to the ground. And that is one of the worst cases of arsons, the burning of Pennsylvania Hall that we have in American history. And so now, why not call it Abolitionist Hall then, right? As the local Blacks in Ercildoun did. Well, in 1842, there was a building, the Clarine Anti-Slavery Society in Lancaster. So you have to remember now, we got, you have Fallowfield is in the middle of like, you know, activity in like Kenneth Square, but then they also have Lancaster, right? And so what happens is it too was burned to the ground in 1842. So think about these radicals are like, look, we ain't trying to build a building, especially when they had sulfur already burning in the meeting place and the like sort. They were not trying to go on and have, you know, this building get burned down, especially with the closeness that it has to the meeting house. And so what they did was that they decided that they wanted to call it, initially it was Free Hall, and they decided on the name People's Hall. And they said that everyone was invited to come and to be in that area. So the People's Hall is served as a grange, a lyceum, a polling place, polling place until 1973, as a school, Girl Scouts meeting place, an academy, historical societies, and as recently as 2008, it was a pop-up shop. One of our trustees did a fundraiser for a Christmas shopping. So it was a pop-up shop, to use language. The motto of People's Hall is "Let truth and error grapple." So what does this mean? And so let's see what Ercildoun actually means to Black folks. Because remember now, we're talking about these people who were seeking freedom, and they were coming to Ercildoun. Okay, so what happens is that there is in a book called Trackless Trail, that was an account that really brings home some great points. And one of the points that they talk about was just the activity of abolitionists in the area, in this like greater Chester County area. And one of the accounts that got to me was that this group of these young boys, their last name was Brocious, right? And that they were their families were potters, okay? And so what happens is that they were supposed to transport, right, this sort of large group of African-American freedom seekers, right, African-American freedom seekers. And when I read it, this was the part that really got to me. He said, "I and my brother, 2 boys, were the only white persons on the trains. The fugitives were armed with pistols, axe, knives, cutters, old scythes, and trouble would have fallen anyone attempting to disturb us." And so therefore, we're talking about a determined group of people to be free. So what Ercildoun was doing in areas like Ercildoun was assisting people who already determined to be free, right? So again, the relationship. So what these Black abolitionists, some also were freedom seekers, right? Some so what happens is that they were really challenging and making Quakers test their faith and test their testimony. Okay. And so what happens is in another account, there was a coming through Ercildoun. There was, so in this one piece, there was like 33 freedom seekers. And in this one account from this, a person who was again in Ercildoun, Lucas Pierce, what happens is he conducted 25 freedom seekers leaving in a horse-driven train. And then in another account, he did 16. So again, Ercildoun was like this place of people coming through and knowing that they were going to be safe. Now, again, the way that Black people would remember People's Hall is very significant. And so when it happens and where it happens in a particular time, in a particular place, right? And so Isabella Stokes was a daughter of a former enslaved person. She summed it up nicely. She said this about People's Hall. Again, Black people would call it Abolitionist Hall. She said, "One old building still stands as a tribute to voices now still. It stands as a monument to old friends who dared to do right." Monument, iconography, People's Hall. So one old building still stands as a tribute to voices now still. It stands as a monument to old friends who dared to do right. One of the folks that really, when we talk about African Americans who came to the area, they settled, this one family, they settled there, and the family was by the name of Ruth, okay? And so they would end up starting a church there. They would settle. He was a person who escaped from slavery, right? And he made it to this right after the Civil War. He made it to this area. He settled. He established a church. His son, William Chester Ruth, would become an inventor. And so he was the one who would, he's now known as like the bell feeler, right? And his engineering skills have even led to an exhibit at Landis Valley Museum because of his ingenuity. It's supposed to be a slide here that talks about a daughter. Her name is Ida Ella Ruth Jones. She ended up becoming an artist. Her work is even, traveled across the world, right? And then you have a man that I want to introduce you to named Charles Brocious. He still lives. He goes to London Grove meeting. He's fascinating. I found a conversation with him. I didn't want to leave him. And yes, we hugged even during COVID, okay? Because I was just so taken aback by the stories that he has, but then like his life too. So I want to do another one of these talks to talk about, again, about how a family negotiates in these areas and how they help in preservation. So I want to share with you in this this talk with a segment of my interview with Charlie.
Called and said, your conveyors are completed. If you'd come up and get them, that would be fine. They're ready to go. And I remember hooking the hay wagon behind a pickup truck and driving up to get them. And after we loaded them, I said to Mr. Ruth, he turned, Joe started to say a number, I don't remember what, and Mr. Ruth said the bill's been paid.
And so why do you think
I didn't understand what he was talking about. And Joe didn't either. And he started a little bit, I've got so many hours in this, and you know that, you know how hard I worked at it. And he said, no, the bill's been paid. I get choked up thinking of it. And he said, Joe said, your great-grandfather was a runaway slave. His great-grandfather helped him get his freedom if the bill's been paid.
Well, now when you, yes.
Rapid production. And then later, he said, before you go, I want to show you a mail order. And he was very proud about that. He took me into a little back shop behind the shop in front. And he had things scattered around, parcels, this and that. And he said, I've applied for a patent for it. And I'm afraid the New Holland Machine Company is going to steal it from me. They had an engineer that came in here the other day or a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I'm afraid they're making an order and they'll have it made before I get it patented. And I think they probably did, but I'm not sure. But there was no question that he had invented that order.
Wow. I mean, you telling the story, you know, here again takes me back, and it makes me, you know, it took me back to that moment when you first heard it, and like you, it resonated. I mean, it, you know, I had this experience with it as well. Like, wow, this connection between two families, and you and Joe didn't know the connection, but Mr. Billy did. And so when you heard those words, and then you knew the story of your family that was who was involved in the Underground Railroad. Now I'm going to have you all to sort of you know, wait there. And if you want to come in to see, you want to come in to see more of that, you could, that's like my teaser. So what had happened was once I was giving a talk at People's Hall, and then Mr. Brochus came through and he shared a story from his youth. And so what you had was that the Ruth family and the Brochus family, right, they were interconnected because of this Underground Railroad. And so to find someone who was, you know, still, you know, able, living and able to tell the story. And it really goes back to this idea of, again, William Chester Ruth, the inventor, the Ruth family coming and settling in this area called Ercildoun. And in order for you to come in and sort of see the presentations, I'm going to stop the screen share right quick, because I'm going to come back on the screen. And so what happens is that to be able to experience that was incredible, number one. But then two, what you find is that, again, these stories are interrelated. I mean, these stories, these family stories are related. And so in the village of Ercildoun, you remember those that radical abolitionist position, we have pictures. Yeah, we got proof. We got pictures, and I want you all to come in and you'll see that the schools were never segregated, when many other Quaker schools and colleges were. Their area was not. And we have pictures of, and we have testimony from Black people, not of people remembering what Black people said, but Black people themselves saying, that place, this area, this geography, this Ercildoun is ours. We belong to it. We are a part of it. And can you imagine the Freemasonry then that would not only produce an artist, an engineer, an inventor, and their brother was a musical person who played throughout the world, who conducted all types of symphonies. And this was all from an enslaved person's family who came to this village of Ercildoun that those fiery abolitionists made. And when they looked at that piece of iconography, they saw their history, just as well as the white abolitionists who were there. Are there any questions? And I'm going to now go to, I see I'm opening up my question and answers, right? Yes, the Cokes. So Mr. Robert Thomas Williams said the Cokes names is associated with is now Cokesville, the busy Lancaster pipe town on the north. Ercildoun is located south of Cokesville in what is more open land. Is there a connection between the two towns in Ercildoun during the abolitionist period? Yes. Robert, yes, there. When you look at the names of the people who were in Fallowfield, again, you have Mary Cokes. She was the one that sold the land for 50 cents. I mean, excuse me, Margaret Cokes sold the land for 50 cents. And so when you look at the map, and I can at the map, you can actually see the there is a there you can see the map where you can see Margaret's name on the land that's right there by Fallowfield. And again, she was the one, it's not on this particular piece, it's on the other side, where you can see that the Coates family gave the land to that. So they're very much very much involved in the abolitionist movement in Ercildoun. So yes, there is a connection. All right, and so I'm going to put this down. Answer line. Is there a history? What is the history of the town's name? It came from a poet. He basically called it Ercildoun, and so it was in a piece of poetry. And James Folden would be the one to say, "Let's call this name, call it Ercildoun." But it was a poet who had it in a poem, and he picked it up. So James Folden is very interesting, you all, in the sense that he would also start the first library. So again, he was a ferocious reader. Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, I get excited talking about People's Hall, and I want you all to really come and see this place and to see the cemetery. See, one of the pieces that is always interesting, and I'm really moving towards this. One of the things that Mr. Brocious had me to sort of, he showed me a cemetery. I didn't even know about this area. And so here's an interesting story about that. So remember that Church of Christ building? So the Quakers who are in Fallowfield, they actually sold the land to Samuel Ruth for him to start that church. Now, why is that important? So if you go to the church today, it's going to be a walled off cemetery, and that is called the Quaker. That's like a Fallowfield Orthodox cemetery. And so that's where you have Rebecca Luke and them are located. So the cemetery was initially, sort of away from the meeting house. Now it's behind the meeting house. But what happens is, so the Orthodox cemetery is on that, like it looks to be on the Church of God, and I think it's called the Church of Christ. It's on their, it's like near their property because of that, because the land was actually sold to them. Okay. And so I'm hoping that, if anybody has any more questions, again, you all, this place is fascinating. And then going back to the cemeteries. So when you go to the cemeteries, you really get to know about people. And so around this area of Ercildoun, we have several cemeteries, and many of those cemeteries, several of them have the United States colored troops in it. So again, not only do you have people who were, again, agitating for their freedom by running away and then settling in areas and then helping whites, helping station masters, being station masters, blacks were, being abolitionists and coming and doing fiery talks and the like sort. And so they were there and they were, engaged. And again, it tells you something about the area. And so when you go into a cemetery, you can also get an idea of the culture as well. That's a part of the geography too. So Carter Nash says, what a wonderful time. I think Quakers would do well to learn this part of history. Yes, I think they will be too. Oh, okay. Eric says, do you know any? Yes. Do you know if the Ruth family have origins in Beaufort, South Carolina? Does Harrisburg Entrepreneurs has a family in the area, and then the area and yeah, I'm gonna tell you something. The Ruth family spreads. They have various. It wouldn't surprise me if they came from that area, because Samuel Ruth went back and got his mother from slavery. And, she was in the Virginia area, I think it was. But it would not surprise me. And the Ruth family is very enterprising. And I've gone to some of their family reunions. And so therefore, and they spread out. And so it would not surprise me if, for example, especially within Harrisburg, particularly being that, that area with that 8th ward, it wouldn't have surprised me if some Ruths ended up going up there. Again, assisting in those types of activities. And so it's the Penn Area Center, the organization began by Quaker. Yes. And again, so what happens is the Quakers have this level of reciprocity with Black folks, because in essence, Black folks made them test their faith. And that's what people's like buildings like Peace of Paul, show. Okay. Yes, they have they have annual reunions, I know, up here too. So yeah, I'm glad to hear. Again, the family is a tight-knit family. And among Quakers, we have one of the more known and published Quakers, Black Quakers. She's a descendant of the Ruth family. And she's active, very active now in Quaker circles. I think that was the last question. I know that we are a stickler for time, and we want to do it live at 5 and do it like the news. And so at that moment, I'm thanking you all so much. And let me tell you something. I want to end with this, right? I want you, again, when you hear the song, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. That's exactly what this little village of Ercildoun did. And those freedom seekers, honey, they troubled the water. And guess what? They helped to transform this nation. So the liberty and the freedom that we have, right, in buildings like People's Hall, one of the few that's still left is and there's one other place called Abolition Hall, but the fact that ours is in continuous use, probably maybe the only one like that still in America. That's why we need your time, treasury, and talent. So I want you to read out. I know you're on, Suzanne, but can I just, for 2 seconds, I want people to contact me, and we want you all to come and support. We need it. Right now, we're on the endangered list. Yes, People's Hall is on the endangered list. We want you to like us on Facebook. If you feel free, please give me a call. I mean, I really need for you to call. I have no problems talking. Here's our phone number. My email is it looks like maybe an I, but it's ltaylor@wcu.edu. Please, please help us. Help. We need you. All right.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the Chester County Historic Preservation Network Board, I, Suzanne Amrich, extend our special thanks to presenter Tanya Thames Taylor and the Chester County Historic Preservation Network, and you, our viewers, for making this program possible. We look forward to seeing you next month on Thursday, December 17th, live at 5, when we explore Christmas at the Barnes Brinton House in Chadds Ford. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a beautiful Thanksgiving.
I'm just one that don't leave until I told you this is like a porch conversation. So as you all leave, I'll be waving and saying goodbye. But it's like this, you go to somebody's house and then you're leaving and they go to the door and they walk you out and then you get in the car and then you have to toot toot when you're getting ready to leave. That's just the type of personality I am. So I'm going to stay in. That's me. I can't help it. So thank you all for joining us. Y'all come, I hope y'all appreciate what we're doing here at People's Hall. We really, really do need your help. And so I'll just, go in. I think Kathleen is probably going to try to, close it. But I just want to, wade in the water. God's going to trouble the water. So, it's very interesting. I'm so happy that you all came out today. And I love talking about People's Hall. Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I hope, you're talking about the presentation and also about, what they're doing at the Chester County Historic Preservation Network. Thank you.